And you can project. The Austrian economists in the last 15, 20 years have been making projections. They've been right. Mises even early on predicted the depression of the 30s. He predicted accurately that socialism and communism would absolutely fail because they have no pricing structure. And he also predicted that the system that we have today would fail, which it is. Unfortunately, his prediction, I'm trying to prove is wrong, because he said that inevitably a system like this moves toward fascism. Unfortunately, it looks like he's being right, because that's the direction we're moving in. But the one thing that we can't predict, we can predict that the currency will collapse. There's no way a paper currency like the dollar can last forever and ever. It is going to end. But the one thing that we can't predict is the timing. We didn't know that there would be a NASDAQ bubble collapse in March of the year 2000 and never come back again. We didn't know that in 1989 the Nikkei would collapse and never come back again. We didn't know when the final day would be for the Dow Jones average. The timing is unknown. And that is the reason that so much has already transpired that had been predicted, and we know the date that it has occurred, but we don't know the date that the world will lose trust in the dollar. And Paul Volcker the other day before the Joint Economic Committee, he was talking about his total surprise about how quickly the financial system collapsed. This has come apart pretty fast. Now, it doesn't surprise Austrian economists that if you don't have a foundation, a building can come down pretty fast. And that's what's happened. But if you look at history of currency destructions, that's what happens to currencies. You can, the value of the currency doesn't go down at the rate you increase the money supply, although that's what it leads to. But if you increase the money supply and you have economic growth, you might have stable prices like we had in the 20s. So you can't predict those times. But the time will come, and I think this is what we have to anticipate with the collapse of the dollar. Why that is important is what's going to replace it? What are we going to have? Right now we have a crop of people who just moved into the administration. You thought the Republicans were bad. I mean, just think of what has come. They're one thing you can give them credit for. They're probably a little bit more honest. I mean, did this crowd ever believe that we should be cutting back and balancing budget? Of course, the Republicans didn't do a very good job on that either. But so we can expect a lot of trouble. And if there's economic turmoil, it leads to political turmoil. And they're not afraid to use it. The one person that I fear the most is Rahm Emanuel. He has some really bad ideas. He happens to believe in the militancy of the government. He believes in the draft. He believes in national youth service. And if our predictions are right, that economic chaos leads to political chaos, they will not be bashful in using this. So that puts more pressure on us. We have the right answers, the right ideas. We've understood it. We understand the history of what has happened. And the great thing about what's happening is there's a lot of enthusiasm for our ideas and a lot of need for this. And that's one thing in Washington that I have recognized, that they're more open and they're very, very anxious to have the answers. But they're not quite there yet. They're not quite in an influential position. I've always predicted that we probably won't be able to have enough time to get enough people into Washington and enough support in the Congress for us to have deliberations and logical votes and move away from this and come back to our senses. What's going to happen is we're going to have a major crisis, and then there will be a real contest on whether we're going to end up with a dictator or not. And I don't think anybody in this room likes that idea and are willing to fight for it, or you wouldn't be in this audience tonight. So it is an ominous responsibility. I believe that numbers aren't the answer. It's the dedication of a small number of people that makes the difference. And our numbers are growing, and we have enough people. My guess is that we probably, from my experience in the last couple of years, And I had no knowledge of what it might be like, because it's sort of like counting the remnant. You really can't count the remnant. And I won't pretend I can count the remnant, but I will pretend to say that I have an idea that is a lot bigger than I ever dreamed. And they're coming out of the woodworks, and they're all over. And the magnificent thing about the message is that young people can be converted to it. This is what's so wonderful. You go to a liberal college campus and talk the same way as you talk to a very conservative college campus, and you talk about liberty. The young people seem to have an open enough mind that they can and look at this and be willing to support it and understand it just out of total need, if nothing else. So the opportunity is there, and our numbers are growing. And we have the internet. Remember the internet? That is just wonderful. And I think when the internet really became well known in our campaign is when those 12 of you out there that started the internet, and then you started voting after the debates, and they said, oh, that's those libertarian bloggers. They always know how to rig these elections and rig these votes. But I'm glad there were more than 12 of you out there. There's lots to be very positive about and very optimistic about. The education of the various groups in the last decade or two, it's been fantastic. And that is what counts. It's not what's happening in Washington now. That counts because you can anticipate how rapidly the crisis might come. But the real optimism has to come from what's happening outside of Washington, D.C. And the best way to remove a bad idea is with a better idea. You just can't be in opposition to what they're doing. We know we're opposed to it, but we have to present what we believe in. And to me, it's such a wonderful thing, because all we're talking about is your right to your life and the right to your liberty. That's what it's all about. Sometimes people think they understand that, but they claim, yes, I'm for your rights as long as you do it the way I want you to do it. Yeah, we as a country in the last several decades have always said that other countries have the right to self-determination. So we go and we talk to them and we tell them we want to help them along to have their self-determination. So we go to them, and if they just happen to have an oil well or two, we'll go to them and say, this is what we would like you to do. And they say, well, fine, we'll do it. So we give them more money and or prop up the government. And then if they don't do it, we bomb them. So I'm suggesting in foreign policy that we have a third option. Instead of bombs or bribery, why don't we just say, why don't we talk to you and trade with you, and why don't we set a good example so that they will follow our ways? We have a lot of examples that does work. Unfortunately, we haven't always followed it. A lot of talk about free trade up in Washington. That was one of the reasons why even Nixon went and opened up the doors of trade with China quite a few decades ago. And we're much less now to go to war against China than we were back in the 50s and the 60s when we were fighting. But take, for example, doing exactly the opposite with Cuba. I mean, here's Cuba right off our shores, and we're not even allowed to talk, trade, travel, or send them a package. And this is one area where I have a little bit of optimism that this administration might allow a little more openness with Cuba, because I think we would be better off and they would be better off, and it's time to change. It's time that we talk to people and trade with them. I just think that it would be so much better off. I absolutely believe it's a total failure to have this total embargo with Cuba over all these years. So Castro stayed in power. He was never taken out of power. In the same time, every time things went wrong with communism, he said it was America's fault.